Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Today I'm going to do something a little different on my channel. This actually may be a world premiere of a new comic universe here on my channel, because I have been given the privilege to read the new comic being put out by Antarctic Press called Public Domain. And it is one of two books being put out by Antarctic Press as part of a new shared universe by their publication company. And the other book would be Jungle Comics. Now, both of these have had Indiegogo campaigns, both of which I've covered. And Jungle Comics came out first with its campaign, but I do believe that Public Domain is going to come out in print before Jungle Comics, just because Jungle Comics is still being drawn, whereas I have a full copy of Public Domain. And that's why I do believe it's going to come out first. And what this new shared universe is going to look like is they're going to take all these old Public Domain heroes and characters and bring them into new comics. And these are mostly Golden Age heroes, which I love. If you've listen to my channel, you know I love Golden Age heroes, and so they're trying to bring these back. For Jungle Comics, they're going to bring back the old Jungle comic heroes, and for Public Domain, they're going to bring back the superheroes. And this is something I really want to see. Now, the writer for this is David Furr, and I've already put Antarctic Press on my whitelist for Comicsgate. That is to say, for people who are part of Comicsgate and want to see professional comics and professional comic companies and artists and writers. You know, these are people we should whitelist. Instead of blacklisting people, I want to whitelist people. Say, these are the people you should follow. And David Furr is on my whitelist. And I hope to do an entire video on David Furr, but I'm going to put his Twitter handle in the description of this video so you can go look him up, because he's very professional, both in his writing and his interacting with fans. So I think you should go to Twitter and follow him if you are on Twitter. But I'm not going to concentrate on him today. I'm going to concentrate on the book. And with this book, I'm just going to give you a very short, like 20-second review, and then I'm going to critique it. Because for me, my review is simply, I'm going to buy it. This is a buy for me. Now, it was a buy for me already, just because it's trying to bring back these older heroes, which I love. And so I want to see that. But after reading the first issue, it started off, it intrigued me just a little bit, and then it got really slow in the middle, if you ask me. But at the end, in the last couple of pages, it hooked me enough so that I want to buy the second issue. And the thing is that it's not exactly my cup of tea, so you might not exactly listen to my review as being the most glowing review in the world, because it's supposed to be a book which deals with more of a mystery type story. And although I used to follow things like The Maze Agency, I used to follow that book around all over the place, being published by different publishers, right? I used to like those kinds of stories, but now I'm more into the comic superhero stories instead of that mystery kind of thing. And this book is supposed to be a mystery. David Furr has said that this book is something that's going to look like a cross between your Watchmen and X-Files. That's what he wants it to look like. I would say after reading it, it looks much more like X-Files than Watchmen, but we haven't gotten terribly far into the meat of this project yet. So the thing is that there's my review. It's a buy for me. But I wanted to give you that review at first, because when I do the critique of it, I'm going to tear it a new one. Because I think this book could have been so much better. And I do hope that in critiquing it, I will actually make some impact to make this book or books like it better. Because I have done similar critiques of things like Alterna Comics, and have actually gotten a response saying, yeah, that's a good idea. And I think Antarctic Press, that's why it's partly on my whitelist, I think that they will listen to such critiques like this and actually incorporate it into what fans want. Because Public Domain, as a book, it's supposed to come out, I think it's 3 issues, and then it's going to switch with another publication called Excite, or Exciting Comics. And it's going to be a book that's something like your old Journey into Mystery, where it has different heroes circulating through it. And so they want customer feedback in order to find out who customers want to read about and what stories they want to read, and then they're going to take those heroes that they respond well to and put them into their own books and flush out this expanded universe that they want to create. And so they want customer feedback. So that's why I'm going to critique this thing. So I'm going to give you some of the art. I'm certainly not going to give you all of the art because I do not wish to ruin this book and its publication. I am going to give you just enough so that you can see what I'm talking about when I'm critiquing it. So it starts off in Berlin, May 1st, 1945. Now, right off, when I started reading this book, I said to myself, this actually should be done in black and white. And I actually did some funny little things because I got a PDF file, right? So I do funny little things with it with my paint programs that I use. And I came up with this to put it on black and white. But I thought to myself, it's a new shared universe and it's going to be something that's out there for people to grab onto as the beginning of this new shared universe. They can't start with a sort of period piece kind of thing where it's black and white. So I thought to myself, no, they can't do black and white. But what they really should have done with this, because I actually don't know who the colorist is on this book. The artist is a guy named Dale Barris, who was an understudy of Neil Adams, and he did some comics for Marvel in the 1980s. And then he went to work for DreamWorks and a few other companies, and then came back into comics. I think this is his first entry back into comics with this book. Don't quote me on that, though. So, with this book, I think that this artist should have been given more priority. And that is to say that, again, his art style is not something that terribly grabs me, but I think that he's spending too much time on the background because there's a lot of detail in the background. And so I would say the background should be almost completely dark. Not to spend so much time on the detail in the background so he can spend time on the detail in the foreground and make his foreground better. And so make all of that in the background, not backlit, but back dark. I think that if you want to do a mystery kind of story, put something in it like a film noir kind of feel where everything in the background is dark. That really helps with mystery. And I think that the coloring in this book is not bringing that out at all. And I think that they could save the time of the artist and have him work more and concentrate on the foreground more if they took that background and put it more into darkness, into shadow, and that coloring could tie right in with the rest of the feel of your book and help tell that story. And so I think that that's one of the ways it sort of falls down. And it starts with these soldiers walking through 1945 Berlin. Now, first of all, I do believe they're Russian soldiers. Let me check that. Yes, they're Russian soldiers. I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I really don't care about Russian soldiers. I really don't, especially in World War II. But hey, that's just me. But honestly, I think that this opening scene could have been done much better because they would have to switch the dates around a little bit. And I don't think it could be May 1st, 1945. But I think that these guys should be in the middle of a war zone. I mean, you got your opening pages. They need to grab a hold of somebody. This is the first book of a new line of comics. You can't just open up the first page and see some guys walking down the street and all of a sudden there's a flash of light. It doesn't work for something that grabs you like it should. These guys should be taken off, running down the street, being shot at, having explosions go off all over the place. Now, I know they're trying to tie this in with something a little later in the story, but still, I think there needs to be much more of a grab here at the first. And there's this explosion kind of thing. They should have, put something in like, it is a mortar. They thought it was a mortar, these guys in the story, an explosion that was going to hit and they were going to get killed, but it didn't happen. But there needs to be an explosion. All right, there needs to be, I would say, 5 pages of this, of where these guys are getting killed, getting picked off, explosions. And then you have this small reveal of this flash of light, which they can't explain, which leads to a guy sitting in the middle of nowhere. I would say he should be sitting in the middle of a crater where there was just an explosion. I mean, again, put it as part of the mystery, because you could have so much more instead of this guy just standing in the corner or actually crouching in the corner, right? And it should be more. You should grab much more, especially with these first pages, because someone's going to open up this book. And the first thing they look at is the first page. It has to grab much more. And the thing is that also there's panels like this. And this, again, is a waste of space, if you ask me, and not very good storytelling. And I'll give you my little rendition of what should happen. I'll give it to you visually, too. There should be, instead of this little thing where it points towards what it says in his dog tag, I think that's very poor storytelling. I think that there should be the large panel and then a smaller panel which is focused in more on the dog tag, and then another until you can see the name on the dog tag. And they do it a little bit with the eye here, but why don't you just have it so that the guy's dog tag chain is caught up in his hand, and so the dog tag is up by his eye, and so you do it 1, 2, 3, 4 like that, and so you can read the dog tag at the end. I mean, this should be done much better. There should be much better storytelling both by the artist and by your writer here in this page. And then it moves on and jumps straight to New York City, 1975. And you get this pleasant looking gentleman here. And here's the thing. This guy is an SOB. And you get that from the story pretty quickly. And he has his female companion, we'll say, with him. And the thing is that, again, you're not grabbing your audience here. Because I know what happens in stories today. What they do is, when somebody's about to be killed, you make them look like a jerk because you say to yourself, yeah, I don't mind him being killed. I really think that's a bad way to tell a story. I think you should have made this guy a really nice guy, a really sweet guy. Take a page and make him a really sweet guy. Make him be really sweet to this woman who looks to be his wife, and she's a really sweet woman. You should have done that and made them appear to be really sweet and nice, and then get killed, because this is where the murder mystery comes from. The murder starts here with this very pleasant looking gentleman, and what happens is that two detectives have to figure out what exactly is going on. And this guy is someone who used to play an old superhero on television, which was Rocket Man. And you can't really tell from the story if he actually used to be Rocket Man or if he was just playing him in the movie or in the television show. I do believe it's supposed to be that he's only playing him as an actor, but there is that question. Maybe he's not. Maybe he was Rocket Man. Who knows? It could be part of the mystery. But like I said, you need to hook your audience much better. And one of the ways to do that is to make this guy a sweet guy and then get him killed, because you put in some emotional investment there, because I'm not emotionally invested in this guy whatsoever. I don't care if he's killed. I really don't. I mean, if he was an actual guy, yeah, sure. But he's a guy in a comic book. He's an SOB. Don't care if he gets killed. Really don't. But if you made him a sweet guy and really nice, then, you know, there might be an inkling of feeling there so that I could go, yeah, it was pretty bad that he was killed. Why did that happen? And then make it part of your murder mystery, because as the guys start to unravel this mystery, find out that no, he wasn't a sweet guy at all, and no, this wasn't actually his wife, and all of this stuff was going on, and he really was an SOB, and all that kind of stuff. That should have been brought into the mystery part of the story. This could have been done much, much better. And then it moves on from that, because this fellow gets murdered. Oh yes, he gets murdered by someone who looks like the Shadow, in my estimation. Now, he might not be the Shadow because they don't call him that in this book. It may be that they're trying to use the Shadow because he's a public domain hero, but they can't use his name because that happens with some heroes. But I don't know exactly if it's supposed to be or not. And the thing is that, you know, I am a big Shadow fan, so I used to even find and listen to the radio broadcasts. Right? I'm a big Shadow fan, so I don't know. This would be something that would really hook me if you're trying to use the Shadow as well. So if it is supposed to be the Shadow and you're trying to bring him into your comics, I think that there's an actual market for that, and people who actually like the Shadow, you should have put in something much more in order to reveal he was the Shadow, or someone who is supposed to be the Shadow, or some kind of hero. You could have used it so much better. And again, you could have used it to add to the mystery, just because if he had Shadow-like powers, I do believe they're trying not to put anybody with powers, especially in these first books, but you could put it as a mystery, like he melts into the Shadow, and then how in the world did he get up there? All of a sudden, you know, it could be he climbed up the ladder, it could be something else. I don't know. But again, it might not even be the Shadow. So I did find that a little bit confusing. And then we have the main part of the story, which has these two detectives. And this is where I think the book sort of falls down the most. It's just because, again, you have these two detectives, and the thing is that it could have been handled so much better, because you have the two guys and their partners, and I really can't tell one from the other. And you should really be able to tell the two detectives apart. First of all, you need to introduce them in a much better way. Give them each a distinguishing characteristic right from the beginning that somebody can identify with. I would say the best idea here, this is just my idea, but the best idea here would have been that you make the one detective as a guy who has no family whatsoever, and he's the guy who always gets called when somebody gets murdered in the middle of the night because everybody knows that he has no life, and so he's out there investigating this murder, and he calls his partner, who does have a family, who does have a wife, which we have here in the first panel showing him, and him saying, why do you keep on interrupting my sleep? I have a life, why do you have to do this to me? Why am I partnered with you? There needs to be that tension there. A tension so that you can tell the difference between who is who. And really, again, there should be this darkness in most of this background, because it reminds me of, I'm always talking about, I love the Bronze Age Batman, right? This detective story should be like the old Bronze Age Batman, if you ask me. And for those books, like the old detective comics, you would get Batman and he would be in darkness. There would be a lot of darkness. It was almost a film noir feel, which I said this book should also try to mimic that, because it worked very well back then. And I love the old Batman because he was a detective, right? And you would have panels where there would be no speaking. There's too much exposition in these pages. There's too much talking between these two detectives. Now, I don't know what David Furr's background is. I don't know if he actually has any experience with being a detective or anything like that, or writing detective stories. I don't know. But I'll give you my little personal experience here, because I used to do research, and basically I would find information for people. And I worked with a whole host of different kind of people, and some of them were Justice Department people, some of them were lawyers, some of them were reporters, some of them were private detectives. And a lot of these people were very quiet people. They would look at the thing that they're trying to solve, and they would be staring at it, and they would just be quiet. And there would be a lot of internal thinking. And the only time they really open their mouth is when something didn't make sense to them, and they really needed to get out of their own head, and then they would run their ideas by somebody else. And that's what the dynamic should be here. You should have these two guys. One is the loner, one is the family man. There's a tension between the two of them. It's all in darkness because this guy always gets pulled out of his bed at night because the other guy has no life, so they always call him during the night. And when you have this tension, you have the guy who has no life. He's your Batman type character. He's always quiet. He's, just looking at the crime scene, and all of a sudden he bends down and picks up something that you can barely see in the darkness, and then he brings it with him. That's what used to happen with Batman. He would do that, and then he'd bring it back to the Batcave, and he'd start to look at it under a microscope and start to explain it to Alfred, because he's trying to figure out what's going on, or Alfred asks him questions. That's what you should have, a dynamic between these two guys right here. A quiet guy and the guy who's the family man, who's just really ticked off at his partner for taking him out of bed all the time. And so it's a very quiet, very mysterious kind of way of telling a story. And one of the things I find with writers is that the hardest thing for a writer to do is to stop writing. You need, especially, I never wrote a comic book. I haven't written a comic book ever. But I would say that the biggest problem with comic book writers is that they need to trust their artists more, and to say, okay, I need to have hands off here and stop telling the story with my words and let him tell the story with the art. And we will still work together so that he knows where I want it to go. But that's what needs to happen. And that's what needs to happen here. There needs to be a lot less talking. That would make this story so much better, and it would contribute to the mystery, especially the quietness, especially the guy who is the detective trying to figure this out in his head. Because if you don't know where his mind is at, then again, there's another element of mystery which should be there, and it's not there. But after all that, the book does get into something at the end which I said really hooks me, which is that we find out that the guy from the first of the book, the soldier that they found, was somebody who actually went on to create comic book characters, a lot of which were these old Golden Age heroes. And he gets caught up in this murder investigation, and he contacts someone who, for me, looks like the Black Terror, and something else is going on between the two of them. Again, this is why and when the story hooked me, because there's very little talking, there is some action, but there's a question for me. There's always a question here. I'm going, what exactly are they talking about? You've given me just enough to pique my interest, but not too much to make me feel like you're just putting in exposition. And that's what happens at the end of this book. And then there is something which happens with this guy who I would say looks like the Black Terror, and then it harkens back to the original first panels of the book with another scene from Berlin. And again, as I said, these last pages hooked me, and they hooked me mostly because the story was being told by the art. There's a lot of darkness, and I think that's why I'm being extra critical of this book. It's because not only do I think that it could be done much better, but I see here in these very last pages it being done better in the way that I have just described, in all of the ways that I have just described, it being done much, much better. And I do hope that this is the pattern of which the other books are going to follow after this #1 comes out. All right, so hopefully that got you interested in public domain and possibly looking at going to your comic shop and ordering a copy of it, because it is something which I think is worth my money. And if you like older heroes, or if you like murder mysteries kinds of stories, like X-File kinds of stories, this is a book that should be for you. I've probably gone on much too long with this one, but I think it deserves much more time than I've actually given it. As always, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about public domain. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.